On this video, we're going to reorganize the data so that we can, first of all, create the line graph, which is built from the raw data and not calculated values. But we don't want our line graph to have both sales and costs in it. We just want sales. Separating the sales and cost data can also make our future calculations simpler. And so it's worth doing in order to aid in our future calculations. So what I've done is I've created a new table down here with just sales and just cost, and I've just copied and pasted the department header and the names. And on the department line, since these are all sales, I don't need to differentiate between sales and cost. I'm instead going to add the dates. So the first date is March 21. And the second date is March 22. And you can typically, in these spreadsheets, copy the dates once you establish a pattern. And our dates are going to go all the way out until April 10th in this example. So I'm going to keep copying, dragging this corner. It's called a format painter. And it will update all of our dates until we have the full week. And then, of course, once you have those, you can then go ahead and just copy into the cost so that you don't have to recalculate those. Now, what we want to do is we want to switch the sales and just have the sales data in our table and then put the cost data in the second table. Now, essentially what we need to do is we need to set up the first row of our table, and then we can copy all of those formulas. If we use the formulas, we can copy all of them without having to do every single cell. Now, the way that this is best to do is not to retype these, although you could copy and paste each of the columns in manually. What I would suggest that you use instead is equal sign and then point at the cell that you want to copy in. And in Sheets, they will suggest autofill, and they will fill in the rest of the table for you. And then if you do this for the second one, then it will likewise autofill. Now, if you select not to autofill, that's fine. Maybe you choose not to do that. You can also just copy the one cell, and then if you drag that down the column, it will also fill in those values for you. So there's a couple different ways to do this. March 24th, just make sure that you are filling in the correct values. Autofill, yes. Autofill, yes. And then you just have to do this going all the way across. So it's a little tedious, but once you do this for the sales, you can actually, you can also do this for the cost, and then the graphs that you need to make will be much easier to make. You can make the graphs, that the line graph in particular, from the original data table, but it requires extensive cleaning up if you do that. And so it's better to have the data reorganized. In addition, when we do these other calculations, we'll get a lot of benefit from being able to copy formulas without having to reconstruct them each time. That's the 6th. Seventh. 8th. Now, it would be super nice if we could just copy all these pointers down into the cost, but they're off by 1. And so we basically, again, have to redo this for the corresponding costs. And then it will also ask us if we want to autofill. But you don't have to do that each column. You can just continue and then deal with the autofill later. And after you stop using it, it will stop asking you. Now, part of the reason we have to set each one of these up manually is because they're going every other cell, and we're pasting them into every cell. So there are some alternative ways of organizing this so that you can take advantage of the every other cell configuration, but it's a little easier in the long run to just reconfigure it properly. Not that one, that one. The first time, so that future calculations will be nice and consistent. The 5th and the 6th. And the 7th. Eighth. And the 9th. And the 10th. Now, once you have all the top row done, then as we saw before, you can copy the whole row and then copy it down the table. And so that will, let's add one more row. That will, that is another way to do that format painting, to copy the formulas instead of doing the copy, autofill the rest of them each time, doing one column at a time. You can just do that first row and then drag it all down, and it will update all the formulas. This makes it easier to double check. Each of your formulas should be pointing at the same row of the data, and every other column W, X, Y, Z, A, B, A, C, X, and so on. So it's a little easier to check that everything has gone through correctly. Now, from this sales data, we can then make our line graph. And so I'm going to highlight all of the data out to the 10th. And we're going to insert a chart. And because it is time-based data, Sheets is going to interpret this as potentially a line graph, and it's going to give us the line graph that we like. If we need to change the chart type, because maybe it's not quite as smart this week, you can do alternatives. The standard line graph is best. It is okay to go with the smooth version, but some of these other versions are not appropriate for this data. And so I would suggest just stick with the basic line graph. Now, we are going to need to make some kinds of customizations. You don't need to worry about the chart style too much. You do need a chart title and axis labels. So if we change the chart title, the names of the departments is not appropriately descriptive, so that's not going to work. You need to include something like daily sales by department. All graphs need to have good titles. And you need axis titles. So in this case, the horizontal axis is labeled department, and that is not the correct axis label we want, because each line are departments. The horizontal axis labels we want here are days, and then the vertical axis label that we want is sales in dollars. If you need to remove things, you can select series and remove things. Maybe you're trying to plot the graph from all of the sales and cost data. You can't have the cost data in this graph. You can adjust the legend, like the position of the legend. If you need to rescale the axes, which I again recommend not doing, then you can use some of these other ones. But generally, other than adding a title and the axis titles, generally it's fine to leave this graph alone. Now, the one thing that I will encourage you to do is not leave your chart on top of your data, because we need to see your data and how you've organized it. And so it's a good idea to move it either to another sheet or just off to the side someplace where it is out of the way. Leave yourself enough room for additional calculations, but off to the side is fine. We'll see it. But if it's on top of the data, then that makes the data itself difficult to read. All right, in the next video, we will start doing some calculations.